So I'm going to introduce Jordi. As I said, I met Jordi when he was the CTO of Wacky. He was actually one of the first customers of my company. That's really fun. And he has no questions. Basically, he said like, hey, what's your price and when can you start? That was great. Usually big companies are more complicated to deal with. So thank you very much for that. But over the years, it's been, he's always been involved in the startup ecosystem in Barcelona. He has been many times an entrepreneur himself. He's been in the consulting side, so more corporate side in Venezuela, in the US. Then he came back to Barcelona, where he's originally from. And then, he's been also investing in startups, became the 10th, more or less below the 10th employee of Wacky.com, the CTO. Then he created another company that was learning games. And most recently, he's doing the CTO role at the hotel network. So thank you very much, Jordi. Welcome to Startup Grind again. Want to introduce yourself a little bit more if I skip something?
No, my pleasure. The only mistake, which is going to be funny, it's I'm originally from Madrid.
Right. You're right. I forgot about that.
And I'm not wearing my shirt.
You're not wearing. For those that might not remember, because I don't know how many people were there. It was actually, your event was, I think, the
first in English, no?
The second in English, actually.
Yeah.
And I think it was the second that we actually sold out. So it was really great. And one of the things I always break the ice in our interview, asking the guest, saying, hey, how many times have you been welcomed on stage as a rock star, right? And you said, oh, many times. And that completely disrupted me. I did not expect that. Maybe you can explain that story.
Well, I had a past in music, but in classical music. So I studied flute, and I used to play with an orchestra, but also with jazz and flamenco bands. So I've had quite a few introductions in large auditoriums and small concert gigs. So, but not, I would say, about talking about business or technology, it was the first time.
Great. Before we go into the main topic of the night, which is how to have difficult conversations, we said with investors to keep it simple, but we're going to be having difficult conversations with the employees, with the bosses, partners, sponsors, clients, whatever, right? I want to break the ice again, because we broke it already, but I want to break it again with asking you some small tips for working remotely for people doing this for the first time, because I think this is pretty useful to everybody right now.
It is funny because one of the things that we value at the Hotels Network is that we offer remote options. In my team, there's people who does 100% remote because they are not located in Barcelona. There's people who live around Barcelona and they will do also a lot of remote. There's people who do some remote. And as I said, there's people like me who do not do remote because we are very inefficient at home. And it is funny because I have always been inefficient at home. I used to have an office in New York, and I had to rent an office in New York because working from home, where I was alone, I was not efficient at all. But with years, you learn how to do it. I mean, I think it's first thing, you need to get ready as you were going to the office. That pajama thing that a lot of people say, wow, I'm going to work from home, pajama all day. That doesn't work. You need to have a routine the same way that you should have a routine when you go to the office. You should try to find a place to work and create, even if you don't have a permanent place to work, but you should have the place where you work, the place where you eat, the place where you have fun, so that it doesn't mix between things. I would say those are the most basic things that I do, and they work well. And in my case, it's a little more complicated because it is my wife and 3 kids at home. So and I have a place to work, but I now share it with my wife. So I'm the one commuting from the living room to my kids' room, to wherever I can find a table and a chair to work.
Great. Let's start. And you raised a really important topic with this, which is a lot of people will be having a difficult conversation with their partners, as in life partner and family. How are you dealing with this? You've got 3 children. So maybe you want to share that because we need to open up as well. We got to talk about everything.
Well, I think that at the end, difficult conversations are difficult conversations, no matter who you're having them with. And it is funny because when when you and I exchanged a few emails this week, it was funny because it brought memories back to me. 2016, I was going through a tough situation, trying to let my ex-partners and my boss at Wacky that I wanted to leave the company, that I thought it was time for me to leave the company. And it was a tough conversation because I felt it was the time, but at the end it was leaving part of something I had built. But at the end, why is it difficult? At the end, it is difficult because there's stakes in the middle. There's a relationship and there are emotions. And that's what it makes it difficult, the emotions, the relationships. And my father, I look very alike, but we are completely different. He's a very corporate guy, he's been very successful, and he reads a lot. And I ask him for advice. What should I do? And he does something that when I was younger, I hated, which is, here's a book, here's a paper, go and read. No? And he sent me a paper that was kind of a summary of a book, which is Conversations, How to Address What Matters Most. And basically it's a book written by Douglas Stone from Harvard University about how to deal with difficult conversations, how to get ready for a difficult conversation. Because in most cases, we know when that difficult conversation is going to happen. There's times that you don't know, but most of them, you can anticipate them. So how do you get ready for that conversation? Because normally you want to avoid it. We all try to avoid, as human beings, difficult conversation. It doesn't matter if it's with your wife, your husband, your kids, your employees, your partners. Difficult conversation is something we try to avoid. But at the end, as you do it more often, there's steps you can take in order for them to be more, to be easier to have.
Actually, I think that most successful people I know, they're really good in not avoiding conflict, right? Do you think you can train yourself into having difficult conversations and actually master them?
I think that the more you have, the better you should get at it. Yeah. But for sure, if you get ready for them and you analyze the output, once they have happened.
Yeah.
But it is, this book describes like the 4 basic steps that you should take in order to get ready for those conversations. And at the end, it seems very logical, no? When it's very obvious what you should do, but we don't do it. And it's funny because you know what you should do. You should try to generate some empathy. You should try to put in the shoes of the other person. You should try to see what are the differences between the two sides of the conflict. And when you put all this together and then you go into that conversation, it's a much easier conversation. Right. The problem is if you don't do that, and then it's the emotional part getting into that difficult conversation, it is a path to failure, because in most of those difficult conversations, you have to be kind of rational with emotions. But if it is the emotion driving the conversation, you'll end up most probably where you don't want to end up.
Great. I wanted to hand over to Victor because actually, he's an investor. He's raised funds many, many times. I haven't. Like literally, my involvement with the investment world is like I do small investments, but I literally never raise funds. So I don't know how to talk to investors. I don't know how to raise money. I don't have to have difficult conversations. I don't even know how to have easy conversations with investors. So maybe before I hand over to Victor, there's one question from Liana. Actually, she's asking how to speak to investors for the first time during crisis like this one. Is it appropriate to ask for funding at this time, like right now? Would you do it? And if so, how would you do it, Jordi? And then over to you, Victor.
Well, why shouldn't you do it? In fact, I'm doing some intros to a couple of friends who are doing 2 different projects for investment. I think that there will be a delayed and pause in capital or in deploying capital into companies, but we still see deals being done, investments being considered. It is true, like an investment it's a business. So like any of our business, we're doing some adjustments because we don't know how long the crisis will take. We don't know how much we will be affected by the crisis. We don't know exactly. There are some sectors that are clear that are suffering a lot. Ours, hospitality, travel industry, retail, they're going to suffer. There are others that are doing amazingly well, like Zoom, Netflix, entertainment. But why should you not try and approach investors during this time? It is their work to invest. So they may change the way they see things, but for me, it's business as usual. You should approach them the same way. Mm-hmm. In fact, you may have something that after the crisis is less valued than now. So at the end, and investors are people. I mean, I had a partner in the past. They said they have two eyes, one nose, one mouth. They're normal people that they have funds to deploy in your company. So go and talk to them. And the introductions are going to be done the same way that 2 weeks ago, and that how we will do them in 2 months' time if the crisis is over.
Victor, maybe you want to follow up?
Certainly. I mean, I really appreciate what Jordi's talking about, because this may seem a little bit counterintuitive to the lady who asked your question. But as Jordi was saying, everybody's a human being here. They're all suffering. They're watching their investments suffer. But if they are professional investors, they understand that there are going to be times that are going to call into question the viability of the startup. If you're talking about early stage startups, or you're talking about a little bit more advanced, professionalism is going to come to the forefront of the investor. They will expect at some point to hear bad news. And as Jordi was talking about, tough conversations are always going to be a natural part of any startup or any company. And so while I think as an entrepreneur, Jordi, you could probably talk about this, it's always exciting to talk about the great news and all the KPIs that are being met and exceeded. But at some point, you're going to have a difficult conversation, whether you're a small startup or a large corporation. And how you approach, a difficult conversation is one, the level of preparedness that you have, the authenticity that you have, and also do not go look like you're engulfed with just pain and you don't know what to do. The more precise that you can be is usually something that investors can help you deal with. It also demonstrates that you are able to understand the nature of the problem and give them some context. Talk about what it is that's going wrong and what might be done to fix it. Because if they think that you're just making bad decisions constantly, then they might lose faith in your ability to lead an organization. But Jordi, as you're the person we're interviewing here, does this ring a bell at all with you in terms of being able to approach a difficult conversation with investors and knowing how to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first thing is you need to be as transparent as you were saying. It's very easy to give good news to whomever and to investors as anyone, no? But the issue is, if you're always as transparent as you can be and you share the information the best way possible, and with what's the current situation, why is this good or bad, what are we going to do with it, have a clear understanding of the picture, have a clear plan for whatever it is, then even though it is difficult, it makes it easier to move forward. And also, for me, I'm too passionate about things, and I'm too passionate is the right word. So how do you separate that feeling from that rational, that you need both in order to, but which is the right balance? I think that when things go well, it is very easy to be very passionate and very happy and very, but when it goes bad, shit happens. I mean, professional investors, and that is one of the things I learned when in one of my first companies when we were in Venezuela, that I'm not gonna take friends and family money ever again, because that's not professional money. And if things go wrong, even though you have told them that things can go wrong, I don't know how I would sit on the table with them again.
Well,
Wow.
if I can, so the difference between being able to address a problem that's coming forward and investors who are used to receiving a dividend,
Yeah.
and those that are all of a sudden hear from Jordi, hey, I'm going to have to do a capital call right now. So they're going to have to switch their mindset in the sense that even though they're used to getting money, a nice dividend paycheck because the startup is doing great, all of a sudden the startup needs help. And one thing, if you're looking for capital, you got to remember investors are investing in the future of this company. So if they are true investors, can you talk about whether or not your partners, your financial sponsors are investing in you personally and in your company for the future?
I mean, if you go to professional investors, they are much more used to getting bad news than non-professional investors. And that conversation, it's easier because they are more used to. And if they are good investors, and let's consider the average good investor, their feelings should not be mixed with the professional part. So if you put the difficult conversation, whatever it is, business is not going well, you want to close your business, you have to fire someone which is relevant for the organization. There's whatever it is, but you come straightforward with a good analysis, with the data, with the plan, even if it is, we're going to shut down this company, which is something I've done a couple of times, and it is the most difficult conversation I have ever had. It's part of what can happen if you're a VC. It's. I mean, you take 10 companies out of the fund, 1 or 2 are going to do amazing and return a lot of money for the funds. If they do well, there's a part of them that will close, part of them that will become a family business or whatever we want to call it. But those difficult conversations are going to appear throughout the life or the cycle of a company. And those are all the ones we have had. Capital funds that are not raised, people you need to fire, KPIs or OKRs you're not meeting. The problem is if you try to hide it from your partners and investors. You have to be very clear, very transparent when things go well and when things do not go well. Because that's the only way.
Based on your experience, is there a certain way to prepare the trust between you, between entrepreneur and investors?
Well, I only know one, which is being honest and transparent. Because at the end, in Spanish, we say, la mentira tiene patas cortas. If you lie, you're going to end cut up. So be transparent. Share the information beforehand the meeting. Share your fears, the difficult times you're going through. There are a lot of times that they might not even be capable of helping you, but you need someone to talk to. And when you're talking about business investment, you have friends, you have family, but most of us don't have friends or family, let's say, in the same situation you are. So I can talk to my wife. She's lovely. She supports me. But she doesn't understand a penny of what I'm talking about, even though she's been married to me for 15 years, 20 with me, and she's gone through all the different companies I have created and so. But she's not involved in this type of processes. So it is very complicated. I talked to my dad. He's a corporate guy. So when I talk to him about raising funds, come on, I mean, I buy and sell companies, but in another scale. So, but at the end, it's the same. You have to go to your board with good or bad information. You have to prepare yourself. You have to talk to your investors a lot. The problem is when you have investors that you don't talk, and all of a sudden you talk to them because things go wrong. Then that relationship is not good enough. That means that you have not been building that trust relationship between both. You just wanted the money and now you have a problem and you think that they can take you out of that problem or whatever it is. So I think that communication has to be fluent for good and bad.
So I hear, in addition to being transparent, what I'm hearing from you is not just a good conversation once in a while when you have good news, but also consistent conversation. And in particular, when things are going not well, do not surprise your investor. Because if they're trusting, their investment is mostly in you. Is that correct?
Yeah. If they are surprised by what you're telling them, you have a problem. I think that they should, and I'm not saying that you need to speak with them every day, every week. You have to have a fluent conversation with them, a fluent exchange of information, emails, Slacks, WhatsApps, phone calls. It should not be a surprise for them that this conversation is going to happen. If so, and it happens, then you should learn from that how it is that my investor is surprised that I'm firing this guy, that I could not raise the funds, that I'm shutting down the company. They should be ready for it. But if they are not, you should think why they are not.
And is there a technique for the question that was posed earlier? For in the concept, I think we've been speaking, assuming that you already have raised capital. But in the in the question that was raised earlier, what advice might you have for somebody who is looking to raise capital right now during this difficult time?
I would tell you that it's going to be tougher. I think that we are all trying to be more conservative than we were a month ago, and that we might be 3, 4, 5 months down the road. So I assume that the percentage of no's that you're going to get might be higher than the average. But at the end, people need to continue with their businesses and life. So I would approach them the same way I would do a month ago. But knowing that most probable, a lot of the answers I'm going to get is like trying to find a job now. Do you think it's going to be easier or more complicated than a month ago? I think that in general, it's going to be more complicated because companies are trying to pause and wait and see what is going to happen. So I think it is kind of similar with the investment situation. A lot of investors are going to be in a wait and see situation. So you should expect more rejections on average than the ones you might have had a month ago.
If I can ask one thing, Victor, circling back to preparing, to paving the way for investors, right? One of the things I see as an investor is half of my investments, they report to me regularly and half of them don't, right? So those who report regularly, it's great because I can wait in and I can offer help. And some of them are really great at that. Like every 2 weeks, they send a report. Hey, these are numbers, these things we've done, people we've hired, marketing actions. And this is how you can help me, right? A couple of them, they're really good at sending how you can help me. And I've sent a CTO for one of these startups, right? Like a fucking CTO that's really complicated to get. But one of my best friends was changing jobs. Was like, well, there's this company I have invested in. Maybe you want to join them, and he joined them, right? So investors can really help you. But those who don't, maybe when I got really bad news from one of the companies I invested in, they're going to close down, right? And I was like, well, I didn't see it coming. Maybe I or somebody else could have helped you, right? Well, do you see this as something useful? Do you think this is something
but I think it's a two-way relationship. Yeah. I mean, I should send you the information, but you should demand it also.
Right.
It is true that a lot of times as investors, we do not want to create overload to our companies, but at the end, the type of information I want to get as an investor, it should be fairly automated and should be fairly easy to send to my investors. And the only part I should add, which I have always done it, which is those are the KPIs, the business, blah, 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 blah. And at the end, there is a part that I always like to add, which is, how can you help me? And there are times that that is simply nothing. At this moment, I don't need any help. But you start foreseeing what you might need. I need some interest to other investors. I need to find CTO, CMO, whatever. I need to validate this business hypothesis. Do you have investments or friends or whatever that could help me? But it is also true that as an entrepreneur, sometimes it's very complicated to ask for help. We don't know what to ask for. And second, it is very complicated to get good feedback with the amount of information I give you. So, but at least if I share my thoughts on an open way, it leads to a deeper conversation with you. You get that email, that summary, and you say, okay, so you're looking for technical guys. Hey, Jordi, can I phone you and we can have a conversation and I'll see if I can help you. But if I don't share that, there's no way you can send someone you know who's looking for a new position to me.
Also, if I can add, in terms of as a serial either investor or entrepreneur, if you take a step back, one thing that young entrepreneurs may not appreciate so well is that investors are always looking for great people for multiple roles. So how you respond during the difficult process is something that they're going to keep in mind as to whether or not in the future, when assuming things get better, they can continue investing in your company, or if they're ever looking for somebody with your skill sets to take on another role at a different company, they're going to be looking for this. And as you mentioned, Jordi, professional investors, they're going to expect bad news. As a matter of fact, most of their investments will probably fail, particularly at early stage. It's not a shocker. So don't be afraid to come to investors with bad news. They usually have many resources, many contacts that can help investors, entrepreneurs, though sometimes they're too shy to let us know about bad news early on. The other thing is, if they are in a position where an entrepreneur needs help but hasn't articulated it, it also goes negatively. You can't, in the sense that you can't help somebody, as you said, Jordi, if you don't know that they're having trouble. And this will go again to, it will speak about the trust in the investor, in the existing opportunity, as well as potential future funding rounds or future companies that might be around the corner that you're just not aware of at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, that trust relationship you build with them, it is known in the industry. So people will know how you behaved. And I would say that more in the bad moments than in the good moments is very easy. But when things go wrong, you have to stand up and do what is supposed from you. So that is going to be told among investors, and that is going to help you or not in your near or medium future. I mean, I've gone through that. So,
Alex, I have a question. You've often stated very plainly and very upfront that the adventure of being an entrepreneur sucks most of the time. Yeah. We talk about the sexy, the fun part of having your own company, but a lot of times we're struggling to meet payroll for the employees who we want to be professional, but sometimes we care for them. And it's a lonely road. But one of the things that I wanted to ask is, when you have the chance to work with multiple companies, Jordi, are you in the position to see whether or not the investment that you've made is time to cut out? Like you talked about leaving Wacky. At some point, an investor will trust your ability to decide, should I invest more of my money, good after bad money, or do I cut and run and try something else with Jordi, who I know is a great investor, an entrepreneur, but we can lead in something in the future?
Well, I've made funds win a lot of money, and I've made funds lose quite amount of money. So, and I would like to think, and I know because I've spoken with them, that my reputation with them or my trust is there. And if I decided to do another thing, I think I could get funds again. But it is very complicated to know when it's the moment to say this has to end. I think that's the most complicated moment, because on both sides, from the investor and from the entrepreneur. From the entrepreneur, you can get from the cost of opportunity, this and that. And from the investment point of view, it is, should I write down that this investment is dead, or should I deploy more funds because maybe with more help, it will continue? Yeah. That conversation, it is very complicated. I have had it several times. And there's been times where I was okay to keep pushing for them. And there's been times when I said, I cannot do it any longer. And I felt like shit. I had not only investors, but people, workers who stayed with me during very bad times. It's like I was feeling like I was betraying both of them. It is, I should keep pushing, but it gets to the point that either you do not have energy, you do not see it, or whatever it is the reason. So it is time to call it end, and then you have to do it properly. I mean, you can close, you can fire, you can do whatever it is, but you have to do things the right way. That's how will people remember you And that's why how people will work with you again or invest in you again. If you do not do things correctly, it will pay off in the future. I don't know when, but it will. The same way that if you do things correctly, it will pay off because people will trust you. Either if they have, of course, if they win money with you, it's even easier. But if they don't do it, but things were done correctly, as you said, they are professional investors. They know most of their investments will not go well. So it's part of the game.
Liana is actually asking another really good question, strictly related to this, which is, what about the logistics of communicating with investors, right? A mass VCC email? I think definitely not.
No.
Phone call prioritizing biggest investors? I think if I may, I'm going to answer with my view. Then Jordi, I'll let you share yours because you probably have done more experience here. But I think that you should know one mistake entrepreneurs do is they forget about their angel investors. Like the earlier we invest in your company, the more risk we are taking, right? And so for VCs, it's more like a safer bet, right? But if you need to create another company, you will not call the VCs, you will call the angel investors. So even though you invested, you will call them again, and you will need them again, and you will need their money. So of course they invested less money, but it's really important. It's crucial. I don't know what's your views on this, Jordi. Maybe you can correct me.
No, I totally agree with you. I was laughing because I was fortunate enough in my last venture not to go to angel investors.
Yeah.
But that's not the typical road. I mean, but I think that the best approach to an investor, and I've done it with you, we have shared that in the past, is a cold email. Like when you do sales, it is very complicated. I mean, investors get hundreds of emails on a daily, weekly basis. So if you want to catch their attention, you need a good introduction. You need someone who knows them well and who can open that door. So in this moment, in the past, in the future, you want to get in touch with investors. I think that the only or the most efficient way to do it is, first, you need to know who you want to talk to, because there are a lot of funds that are very sexy and do very good things, but maybe they don't work in your space. So the first thing is, please do not ask for introductions to people who do not invest in what you are doing. And second, ask for introductions. That's the best way that your email or your pitch is going to be read on that hundreds of emails that we all get. If I get an email from Alex, hey, Jordi, I'm looking at this opportunity, would you consider it? It's very probable that I'll read it. If I get like LinkedIn or cold emails, it's quite probable that I won't read it.
So in addition, perhaps some of the silver lining, Alex, on these difficult times is to reinforce and the message, the fact that you have to start delivering value very quickly. So I was listening to one webinar this morning that getting money and in terms of capital as well as making money is kind of it's a byproduct of delivering value for your clients. And if you need to be, if ever there's a time to sharpen the skills of being a good salesman, this is it. Because if you think investors will know that in order for them to recoup their investment, it's probably going to take 5 to 7 year cycle. So if you're looking at 2, 3, 6 months out, then your misalignment between what you need in terms of cash and what your investor thinks you're going to need over the next 4 or 5 years, you're on completely different planets. And so keep that in mind. It could be optimistic because you might see seeing things much more bleak than an investor would be. I don't know if you would see things that way as well, Jordi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end, I don't see this period of time nowadays, this crisis or these complicated moments change much what we were doing and what we should be doing in terms of investment. I mean, it will make it, at least I'm not investing at all, but not now. I have not been investing since I closed for the last year or a couple of years. My wife will not allow me to invest. But
you need to have a serious conversation then.
Well, we
you probably had it. It sounds like you already had it.
Well, we had it, and since the last one didn't go well, now I have to take some time off. But I think that it is business as usual, with more complicated times, with more rejections, as I said before. But we need to get through, and as normal as we behave, and as more close to what we were doing before and we will be doing in close time, I think it will make it easier for the whole ecosystem to move and to, I don't think that survive is the word, but to go to not as rough as things might seem today. And it is also true that we've only been confined in Spain for 10 days. So this crisis seems very big, but we have quite a few weeks to go. So we need to make it as normal as possible. And I think that from the investment side, it will look the same. I mean, I've spoken with some of my friends in the VC industry. They keep getting pitches at the same rhythm they used to.
Exactly. I've got a question for you two, actually. Speaking to investors, and that's a question for our friend Luis. Is it a good time to kill the zombies in the portfolio?
I think that's what we were dancing around a little bit earlier. Actually, this is an excellent time to do that. And sometimes it may seem a bit cold, but entrepreneurs who are spinning their wheels, dedicating time to a business that's not going to succeed. That's time away from their family. It's time away from their children, and it's time away. If they are good entrepreneurs, but they just happen to have a business model that's not working, better is a 3M model. Kill it as soon as possible, and give them a chance to come back with another opportunity. And some of the best entrepreneurs, and you're hearing this more and more, are the best VCs and angel investors. They're looking for entrepreneurs who have failed, because there's never a better way to understand and learn lessons than when you've lost your money and you've had to have those difficult conversations with investors. But I very much agree with Jordi. It's much harder to have with your sister who may have lent you money, your brother who may have lent you money, your friends who may have destroyed a relationship for 15 years. Go ahead, Jordi, please.
I think that it is overvalued. I mean, and I have not created Google nor Facebook nor whatever. I mean, but when you have done one company that is been super successful, chapeau. I mean, hats off. It's amazing. But when you have gone through difficult and really difficult times, you have to close companies, fire people on those processes, and so the learnings that you get in most cases are much better than when everything. And I know that even if you create a Google, there's been completely complicated times. I'm not saying that it was a cake, but that those bad situations, you learn more from them than when things go well. That for me, it is 100%. And of course, investors value. That's why also they value people who have started companies several times, because in theory, you have done it several times. It is true that every time it's different because the business changes, the partners might change, everything changes, but you have demonstrated that you have done it before several times. So it is most likely that you know how to deal with money, you know how to deal with investors, with employees, with partners. So there are some of the skills that you might look with a younger entrepreneur that this guy has proven they can do it. So that's an advantage. Being an older entrepreneur, it's an advantage to being the youngest one. But at the end, it is the time to kill zombies. I think that we should learn to close companies sooner than we do, especially entrepreneurs, because we fall in love with our own companies, our own ideas, and sometimes we don't listen to our investors. We don't listen to our friends telling us it is time to call it a quit. So maybe using these times or other situations that might happen in the life of a company and say, I'm not going to give you more money. I'm not going to give you more. And sometimes it's not money. I'm just giving this company for that. And you start realizing that you're being left alone and you realize that you should close it.
Before we move to the next block, there's actually one question that's strictly related to this. It's how to make the most out of a rejection, right? Because 99 out of 100 times you're going to pitch an investor, he or she is going to say no. How to turn that into an opportunity as an entrepreneur? How can you learn from this and endure this situation?
I think that it all depends on how you get that no and the information you get within that rejection. because there are rejections that are directly no, with no explanation. So there's nothing to learn. There are no, I don't invest in this. No, it's not the moment because I don't have funds. I think that you can learn from rejections where there's been a minimum interaction with that investor and there's been an exchange of information. And then you learn why it was not the moment for them. It is because it's not the right moment on the company. It is not because the valuation is not the right one. Your revenues are not where it should be. The team is not good enough.
Yeah.
And at the end, in a lot of cases, it's a simple opinion. So investors, with all the respect, they know nothing, as we don't as entrepreneurs. I mean, unless you're a very focused investor in a very clear vertical, but if you do web investments or technology investments all across the board, it's very complicated that you know about everything. So at the end, sometimes it's their investment thesis, sometimes it's gut feeling, but you need to take back all that information. And when you have not 1 or 10, 50 rejections, you start seeing patterns of those rejections. You start seeing that the idea is not good enough, that the market is not big enough, that your revenues are not where they expected to be. They might be wrong, but they expected you with this amount of money being spent and this.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there are companies that are below and then they did better. No, it's at the end, we all have our hypothesis of investment. If you are within those boundaries, I will look into it. If not, directly, I don't look into it. If I look into it and I do more interactions with you, you should get more value to get back to your desk and think, what should I do? I'll put a very clear example. Learning games, we were raising funds May 2018. We had a completely free application. Usage was great. We were doing really well in Southeast Asia. We had one of the biggest fund in Europe very interested, and it didn't work. And we started talking also with other VCs in Europe. And difference between Europe and the US: in Europe, you need to show revenues, while in the US, there's still a lot of opportunities. Well, if you just show growth, it's good enough. You we'll see how you make money in the future. So after coming with not 1 or 2, but 10, 12 investors telling us you should have revenues by now, it was like, well, if we need to raise money, we need to create revenue. So what did we do? So we went back to the table, we changed our roadmap, we changed what we were looking into, and we built our revenue generation model. So when you get rejections, if you get few, there's few information to, unless everyone is telling you the same. But the more you get, the easier it is to understand what the investor is looking and you don't have.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to the next topic, actually, because one of the other serious conversations you will have, and that's strictly related to investors, but to other people as well, is how about to close a company, right? Or like how to face bad times. Like how do you prepare your team, for instance? What kind of communication, over communication versus under communication? How would you go about it? Maybe let's start with something softer, like revenues are going down.
No, but I think that it all depends. I'll go back to the same. How transparent you are with your investors and your employees and everyone. If your employees are surprised because you're closing the company, you're doing a bad work.
Yeah.
It means that you have not shared with them how things are going. So if they are surprised, you should consider that you are not being transparent enough. And of course, there's a line on how much you can tell and how much you should keep it to yourselves, okay? Because at the end, there's this relationship. Even if you want to be very transparent, I'm pretty sure that even Buffer or these companies that we adore I'm pretty sure that even at Marsbase, that you're very transparent with everyone. There are things that are not being shared because it's like on a family. I'm very transparent with my kids, but there are things that my kids do not know.
Yeah. For instance, like in a couple of occasions where for instance, I'm going to share a specific example. I want you to share something similar because I think that could be useful nowadays, right? A couple of times in our history, we're an agency. A couple of times in our history, we lost 2 big clients the same week. And sometimes that would amount to like 30 to 40% of our revenue, right? And of course, if you have other clients waiting, it's not a big deal. You can share that to your team. I mean, we indeed shared that right away with the team, but we also told them, this is how much runway we've got. And of course, we have other opportunities. No one needs to worry, right? But there's a fine line that if you share too much, maybe some people will start to get worried, and that will somehow spread around the team. That will create rumors, right? So sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to say that we've lost this client. That's it. But we will not perhaps share the plan of, hey, we've got like if in 6 weeks we haven't closed a new deal, we might start thinking about firing people, right? Because it's an hypothesis, right? How do you go about it? Like, how do you know until what extent you can share with your team without creating excessive worry?
I think there is not a magical recipe for this.
Yeah.
I think that every occasion is different. I like to be very transparent and try to be realistic, but also you need to make sure that the business, even if there's a slight chance that can continue, you have to grab it and you have to use it. So you have to share as much information as possible, but taking into consideration that you cannot harm the company with information you're sharing. So if by sharing an extra piece of information, you might cause that anxiety and people look, and at the end, if we're talking about technology companies, if you put anxiety and uncertainty in your employees, they will find a job tomorrow or in 2 weeks. I mean, I closed learning, and one of the things I did, I helped all my employees to get a job. And in 2-3 weeks, all my employees had a new position.
That's incredible.
That's a fact. I had a lot of friends helping. The space is, there's a need for engineers, digital marketers, and so, and there were people who left before because they felt that anxiety and they didn't want to stay until the very last moment. So that fine line, there are times which I thought I had shared too much. There are times which I thought I could have shared some more information. I don't know where that line is. I think it has to be analyzed case by case.
Question for you two. Actually, it's, companies grow at the very beginning, hopefully, but one day it stops growing, kind of hit a plateau, maybe it goes down, and there's this one day, let's call it day one, where you need to share, the first day you share bad news with the team. How do you do it? Like, do you get all of them in a room? Do you send an email, or what's your tips here?
This means that they didn't have the access to the information.
No, I mean they do have, but like maybe it's a business.
I think.
Or
and there is one thing.
Yeah.
As a entrepreneur, CEO, whatever it is, the view you have is different than the one your employees will have. And the things that concern you are completely different to the things that concern your employees, which is normal. I mean, you might be looking much more into the business and they're doing the development they are asked, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it also depends how big is your company when you have to deliver those news. If the company is small, you gather them together. But if you start having people deployed around the world, maybe it's not that there is no way that you can sit with everyone at the same time. So
let's talk about small companies, because I assume most people in our audience, they will be, our size, like 15.
Yeah. I think that it doesn't matter if they are remote or not. You should sit and share the common information that you want to share with everyone. And maybe then there's extra information that should be just shared with different people. Then you do it apart. But the common information that everyone should know firsthand by the leading members at the same time.
Victor, how about you?
I agree with everything Jordi's put forth, and I was going to say that it really depends on the size of the organization, as well as if you're running a small team, and this is how I've been looking at all our conversations, are maybe 25 people or less, is how in my head I had. You start to understand which ones have an appetite for risk and which ones don't. And as Jordi said, if once you start to get larger than 15 to 25 people, it gets harder to understand what motivates those different individuals. So I've never really had a company that's bigger than 20 people, and I try to not have employees. I'd rather have partners. So everybody's already kind of tuned in. They have shares in the company, and they're very, attuned to what's going on with the company. But to answer your question, the ability to share bad news with different people in the organization, I agree with Jordi 100%. It's on a case-by-case basis because they react very differently. I know even within a small company that I'm managing now, some people with just slightly, I wouldn't say negative news, but if it's not great news, they get overly concerned. And some people don't want to know about anything because they just like to be in their cubbyhole and work great. And I know how to manage and motivate those people. So I think you do have to be careful about what you share. But without a doubt, Jordi's advice is the sooner that you can share bad news and avoid surprises, that's better. That's the same with investors as it is with employees, as it is with the banks. Yeah. As long as you have that information flowing and from the very beginning. And Alex, what you do with the startup grind is a fantastic example. I'm sure you do this with Mars Based. You keep a fantastic weekly update as to what's going on. It's that ambiguity, that uncertainty that a lot of people perhaps perceive overly negative. And so I would venture to guess when things start to go bad, let them know so there's not a surprise.
There's a couple of people in the audience that are actually our partners or sponsors, so I will address this because I think it's relevant. Because when we were hit by this, some of our partners and sponsors, they paid a lot of money to be our partners and sponsors, and some of them had signed or paid like literally a week before, right? And so it was like, oh, what a bad timing for them, like bummer. But what can you do? So in this case, I asked for advice, and that's something like, I reach out to other people. It's my first crisis as an entrepreneur. Like in 2008, I was still in the uni, right? So I didn't know. So I reached out to the CEO of Startup Grind, and he said, like, you should communicate proactively, really clearly, stating what you know and what you don't know, and be totally honest and humane about it. And more than ever, you need to communicate like a legend, right? So I called all of our sponsors and partners. I literally called them and say, like, hey, have you got a minute now? How are you doing? Is this affecting your business? And how can we help you? And then, hey, by the way, this is our situation. This is what we're going to do. We don't know a lot of things now, but this is what we know. We're going to do events online. We'll figure it out. Then we will, we'll talk about the rest. What can we do to give you back the value that you have paid for, right? So I think that's something. So thank you for asking. That's something I didn't prepare for. Like, I think it was a great move. So actually, that brings me back to the next question I wanted to ask Jordi is, Victor mentioned some people in your company will have an appetite for risk. And I think that's something you learned in your previous companies. You had this conversation about like, companies not going well, we might have to shut down. Who wants to stay and who doesn't? How did you go about it? If you can share it, of course.
Yeah. So one thing I like about what Victor was saying is that, and I always try to do it, is the sooner you put it in front of people, the better. But also because if you manage to go through those difficult conversations and difficult moments, you build trust on those relationships. While if you hide that information, if you are not speaking the truth and you go through, you always sit a doubt on others people's mind. And then when it gets to another complicated situation or even a good situation, you're always going to think, but there might be something hidden that I'm not getting. So since I like trust and relationships, I think you have to be transparent. But in this case, the times that I have had to go through this situation, and it's been 3 times, I've been very honest and trying to let people know what was the situation. And of course, trying to convince everyone, but most the people I thought were key to trying to save or to move forward with the project, and try to see how can you compensate that trust and that belief in the project and in me or in the team. And you have to find ways to do it. And you have to go to the investors and maybe say, if we go through this with these people, we need to make something. And that something, of course, depends. There's people who might want more stocks in the company. There's people who might want a raise, whatever it is. But I think that trust should be paid somehow. And most likely in those difficult conversations and difficult situations. And if people help you go through, they should be rewarded. And if not, you do not go through those situations or those conversations, at least that relationship has to be kept as good as possible and with that trust, because the world is very small and you will find those people again. And those people will be asked about you and you will be asked about those people. So you have to do things properly, no matter how much it costs. I mean, we were closing the company and a lot of our lawyers were telling us, you could try and not pay people by doing this legal form. And I said, no way. I mean, everyone is going to get their money. If not 100%, as much as I can pay. And when people see or perceive that you're doing what you should do, things normally are easier than what you expected.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting to, Alex, also, as a lot of companies are starting to have trouble because they have clients that have uncertainty, they're not sure if they're going to be able to pay. One of the things that makes it very easier to have these conversations is if you have this trust early on, and as you said, when as soon as people have paid and all of a sudden everything changes, even though there was no ill will. I remember there was one company we took over, and basically we had just discovered that 3 of the clients had paid. They were their largest single clients, and they found out that the company was going bankrupt. We went in, we acquired the company. First thing I did was I walked in and I gave face to who the new management team was. Now, I didn't receive the funds that they had just paid to because I went to another company, but it made a heck of a huge difference for them to trust in us to deliver value and to try to figure out some way to ameliorate the situation, because I didn't want to lose them as clients, but they certainly felt like they got taken advantage of by another company. And as long as you are able to give them the face and make it more human, more relevant, they're willing to bend over backwards if you try to deliver good service moving forward. And if there's a chance to understand the needs of a customer more closely, there couldn't be a better chance to do so now. Call them, reinforce the relationship with clients that you already have, because they're the ones who are going to come through for you again later on. And as Jordi just pointed out, the world is very small. Your reputation gets around very fast. And did you come through them as best you could in a difficult situation? They're going to come back to you, and it'll be paid in rewards much bigger when you come back if you were straight with them. So I think
let's talk about the how are you dealing with this right now, right? I would share my situation, but like literally we're still figuring it out, right? Our situation is very stable. Like none of our clients have said, hey, we're closing this down, we're shutting down the business, or we're pausing the project. So right now it's too early to talk about changes. But what we're doing is communicating to our employees and saying, hey, everything is all right, like nothing's happening, but maybe I'm trying to think, maybe I will send an update every week, every Monday morning. Here's the situation. Nothing changed? Good. Something improved? Better. Some client has died? That happens, right? Their business. Always the business dies, not the person. So how do you go about it? How are you facing this situation of uncertainty? Because most of all, we don't know how long this is going to last.
So you can imagine that being in the hospitality business,
travel.
We started getting emails, phone calls from customers that they might not want to leave you, but they cannot pay you. It's not a matter that. So there's people who are closing their businesses. There's people who all of a sudden, let's put in Spain as an example, all hotels are closed.
Yeah.
So how do I pay for services that I cannot use? So And then, of course, we have a sales team. You're phoning people. No one wants to buy from you now. Our client success team, of course, we're trying to, as Victor was saying, we are on top of every single client. I mean, this is the times that you have to prove you're there for them. How can I help you? And this is the first thing we did. We started calling clients saying, how can I help you? How can you use our technology in things you have not thought about that might be beneficial for you? We are delivering new functionalities that were in the roadmap for other moments because we think they're good for them and we have spoken with them. This is the things we have in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Is there anything that would interest you? And when some of them point you in the same direction, you have to deliver it. And that's the beauty of being a startup, that we are agile and we should be capable of doing these changes as needed. But on the other side, it's also truth that as startups or small, medium businesses, we have the limits that we have in terms of economical and forces that we can move. But you need to listen to your customers. We are analyzing case by case. We are not doing anything like everyone is the same. But our teams, it is true, sales has less sales work to do, so they can help the company in other areas. It is true that my side of the business, product and technology, it is more business as usual, if you want. We shuffle what we need to do, but we need to deliver more things. But other areas are dealing a much tougher time.
Exactly. How about you, Victor?
On my side, actually, absolutely identical with Jordi was saying. One of the challenges that I think is actually very interesting. It gives you an opportunity to understand your clients at a much closer level. And sometimes what they needed and what was valuable to them 1 month ago is no longer valuable to them. And you may be, and the silver lining to this situation may be for some of for some clients in one of my companies, is that they may discover that they really needed to empower themselves through online webinars and their delivery of through digital e-commerce. That's not something that they did before. Now they realize they always knew that it was important, but it really wasn't that critical to them. And all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 months from now, they're going to have this competency better rolled out. And we might be there to help them. And we identified this problem for them, or this vulnerability, and their ability to take advantage of our services, as Jordi said, with our technologies, our products, things that was not interesting to them before. If we can show them how they can generate revenue and generate value for them with our products now, that's something that is that could be very valuable to our clients. Similarly, while I think I'm again totally in line with Jordi. No client right now wants to hear about what new products we can sell them, because nobody has money or there's so much uncertainty. What they can appreciate is that, say, 2, 3, 4 months from now, if they want to see return on their investment for marketing or advertising, this is the time to start repositioning how they market themselves to other customers. And I'm seeing this in my companies with Metropolitan, as well as we've already shifted. About 8 weeks ago, I tried to start buying medical products here in Spain. I started buying containers to ship. And as you well know, Alex, I ship hazardous materials from Spain to the United States. And those materials are very useful. But guess what? Those same containers can send medical products made from Spain to the United States. And we tried to make that shift a while back. Our clients in Spain had never thought about doing that. We've identified a need and developed a new market for them. And I think, as always, it's going to be a painful shift, no doubt. But for those who are nimble, as Jordi put up, if you have to be agile and you want to be sensitive to the needs of your clients, this is a fantastic time to make yourself known that you can add value for them.
And how about, because I had a really good conversation with one of our clients today, and they are a similar company to yours, Jordi, right? They provide it's a B2B platform for retail, right? So they're fucked, but not 100%, right? So they are calling their clients, and literally they found that one of the byproducts, right? One of the not their core product, but one of the other secondary products can be really helpful right now. So how can you reprioritize or shift your focus, team, sales, and everything into a secondary product, or like an investment project?
I think that if the culture of the company and the agility and maturity of the company is there, it should be fairly easy. We're doing something similar. We are launching things or promoting things that were not that core. Mainly because what we do is we help our hotels get more reservations on their website. And nowadays there are no reservations because you cannot do a booking for tomorrow. And since we don't know when will those bookings be capable, because we don't know if it's going to be a week, a month, or 2 months, or second, when will people like to book after this crisis? Because one thing is when the government say that this is over. Second is when I decide to travel. Okay, but our technology is also capable of delivering information on their website. Are you taking advantage of this? That maybe it's a product that we had there, but it was never pushed too much because it was not the one helping deliver that conversion. But you can use those same tools in other ways. We're also putting information on how the direct bookings are affected by this crisis. So by sharing different practices that they can use the product, so we can help those customers, and hopefully in 2, 3, whatever is that amount of time, they see that, as Victor was saying, that relationship and how we provided value, let's say for free, and that we strengthened that relationship. But what we're doing, so salespeople is helping our client success team to get in touch with the customers because they have a very direct relationship with them, letting them know we have created, our marketing team has created a lot of documentation, examples on how to differently use what we have. And we hope that it will provide results in the near future.
Victor, you want to add something to this, how to take these opportunities and how to shift your mental bandwidth into something else?
Well, I think we're desperately trying to do that in 2 of the companies that I'm running, that I'm more actively engaged in here. And one of them is, for example, we haven't announced it, and I don't want to be too self-serving, but because I know nobody's going to be buying services from one of my companies, what we're going to be doing is just transforming, say, you know what? This is our chance for people to remember that we were there for them when things really should hit the fan. So we're going to give 50,000 euros worth of free marketing services for our customers. And we go out there and we talk to people who have never done either webinars, people who have never done social media. There's hundreds of companies that need all kinds of support with generating content. And there's tons of people right now who are great writers right here in Barcelona that we can basically redirect them to help them get their message out. And, that goes from, electronic commerce to food delivery companies, to hazardous material companies, to import-exports, international schools. It goes across the gamut. A lot of them are in pain, but right now, what can we do to add value that they're going to remember not 2 or 3 weeks from now or 2 or 3 months from now, but 5 or 6 months from now or next year when we have to renew our contract? We were there for them and they will remember it.
How about the plan? Like we're going to be taking the last questions. So if anyone wants to send some last questions, we're about to wrap this up. Yes. As the situation progresses, we don't know how long this is going to take until it resolves. Maybe it takes days, weeks, months, right? So you have to kind of devise or project some scenarios. So if this happens, I will do this. If this other thing happens, I will do that, right? I'm talking specifically about providers, for instance, like when's a good time to drop a provider and how to do it, right? Or how do you project, how do you devise this plan of, if we reach this point, we're going to do that. And what areas are involved in the company? Who should prepare for this?
But it is similar to the rest of conversations. I mean, I have called all my providers already.
Great, that's good.
To the ones that there is let's say a human relationship. There are other providers that's just a business credit card, and that's fairly easy. If I don't need the service, I will disconnect it. But there are others that there's an account manager, there's a deeper relationship. So the first thing I've been doing, and the other teams of the company the same, it's, guys, we have a problem. I mean, it is not that we have a problem as a company per se. It's the business has a problem, and we all might have a problem. So how do we work together to navigate this storm? because this has to be a win-win situation. It is not that I can go out and ask everyone, I'm not going to pay. That's not the way we do it, and that's for sure not the way I do it. But the first thing is letting them know, if they didn't know that they should, that you are in a fucked up business nowadays. Second, what they can do for you, and third, what can I do for them? And sometimes it is, I might be capable of getting commitments for the future if this happens. So I think that it is, again, the same. Being transparent, being honest, and advance the conversations as much as possible. Of course, then you start building your own plans. Is what happens if our revenues decrease to a certain level? Then we will have to cut whatever it is. Then those plans from an executive point of view have to be made. But the first thing is be sure that your providers know who you are, where you are. If that's the first conversation you have with them, the same, but you should have had it before.
One quick question from our friend Nacia from Star Brand and Typeform actually is, have you ever had a situation in your companies, for both of you, Jordi and Victor, where you had a niche in your company, but somehow you could cover it up and you solved it? Did you tell the investors or not?
Oh, yeah. We've had a number of those.
Please share. I'm sure it's going to be fun.
I don't know if they're probably watching. We've had a number of situations where there's very large, there's a client that represents a very large percentage of the intake of the revenue. And that client will then, of course, in order to fulfill the needs for that client, you have to make certain investments. And sometimes you go in with the best of intentions, as you always do, and you start to prepare to do work. You take on staff, you invest in marketing, in social media, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, and again, no ill will, the client backs out. And your investor actually helped fund you. And they could be anything from $10,000 to $100,000 to $1 million investment. Well, you basically got to ride as hard as you can to, I think, still in the spirit of fulfilling the desire to meet that business opportunity. You just perhaps have to replace client one with client two. But until the client one is fully backed away, for example, that's something that happened with us. You basically want to make sure that when you come to the investor, you want to give them specifics, as Jordi was talking about earlier. The more specific you can be about the particular problem that you had, the more credibility you're going to have in terms of getting the investors or your management team or your clients or your employees to help solve that with you. They'll become your partners if they understand. But getting back to Nazia's question, do you cover it up? Well, you want to be as transparent as possible, but you also don't want to create an alarm unnecessarily. And so it's an art of being a manager. How much do you share? And that could be also within your business as well as within a friendship or other relationships that you have. But we've definitely had to deal with that on my side and multiple companies.
You have this situation, Jordi?
I think that we have all gone through it. And the matter that if you share it or not, I think it is also related to how big was the thing that you needed to cover. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you, as we were saying, you don't need to share everything. So sometimes it's going to create more problems sharing some information and how you solve it than not saying nothing. But there are others, and I think that most of the cases that it has to be shared. And of course, we have covered things from everyone. The good thing is, if you can tell it, is that things went well after it. If not, is that you're dead.
Related, not to use the ends justify the means, but sometimes a small problem gets much bigger if you don't share it quickly.
Yeah.
And even if it turns out to be a big problem, it's not the problem, it's the shock of the problem that creates distrust. And usually if you have to hide it, then maybe you have more people to help you hide it. The employees, the investors. If you're talking about a company that's listed, because I got involved with one of that as well, then you have responsibilities to shareholders for people and nameless faces that you've never met.
Yeah.
And your responsibility is to maximize that shareholder value. So you have conflicting interests and conflicting legal responsibilities to how you manage information, because in the end, it's a judgment call, and so you definitely want to be able to maintain your integrity as well as your spirit and your credibility with people who are going to help you solve that problem rather than hide it. But it's a judgment call as to whether or not you were discreet or whether or not you were covering things up.
Great. We got a couple of minutes left before we wrap up. Is there something you two want to talk about, or think it's worth adding up or commenting before we wrap this up with our final question?
Jordi, you're our guest.
First, thank you all very much for you, Alex and Victor, and also all the participants in the call. I would, and I'll send the link later to Alex. If anyone is interested, please read the book I was mentioning. It is interesting, the framework they provide, so that you get ready for those conversations. The more and more you do it, it's like exercise, the better you get at it. And the more you, of course, try to get the learnings of why did or did not go well.
Great. One last question for you, Jordi, is we didn't have this question when we interviewed you in 2016. So this is a new question we have come up with. Actually, I think I borrowed it from a podcast. But what's the most expensive fuck up you've ever done? And can you quantify it?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you share?
So
that's going to be the last question, though.
Well, the biggest fuck up was closing learning, which it cost several millions to an investment fund. We were not capable of taking the company where we wanted. Mm-hmm. And I had amazing investors who believed in me, an amazing team who were there until the last minute. But I was not capable of turning around the numbers and make it look good for the investors and at the end for me. And it took a big cost for them in money, for me in health. But you learn from it. You need to learn from your mistakes. And that's the only way to move forward.
That's great because, you and I have a close relationship. You told me pretty much everything about that process. It was tough for you, but I think everyone involved left with a really good, aftertaste and your reputation. Well, you found jobs for your employees, try to maximize the value for the investors where it was possible, and everybody got paid to a certain extent. So, of course, there are always people unhappy, but I think how you dealt with that, I learned a lot, and I hope I will have the strength someday to deal with that situation. I hope it doesn't happen.
Hope you don't, but at the end is...
Yeah.
I had a friend who told me that about how much money had I lost in the process. Personally, I said, well, more than a good MBA. But that's...
Can I repeat?
I will for sure. Once my wife allows me to do it again. But it is true. I have learned a lot from that process, or the previous one in the States where it didn't go well. Of course, I learned a lot also in Wacky and other companies where we made money. But when things go well, you take it for granted that the decisions you took were the right ones. When they don't, is when you try to learn and question which were the ones that were correct and which were the ones that led to the fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good learning. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending our third online event of Start Brand Barcelona. Keep tuned. Our next event is going to be this Friday, actually at I think it's 11 in the morning. Let me just check it. It's going to be in Spanish, as I said. So it's going to be on Friday at 10:30 in the morning. We're going to be announcing the speaker tomorrow, right? We're having the last conversations, and as soon as she confirms, gives green light, we're going to have the event. So thank you very much, everybody, and keep grinding. If there's something we can do for you, either Victor, Jordi, me, the volunteers at Start Brand, our partners, the sponsors, or all our community, definitely let us know, because we're here to help. And most of all, we are all in this together. Thank you very much. Until next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Stay safe.